Hey, I'm Alex Radical from Board Game Co, and today I'm reviewing Inferno from Red Mojo Games. Inferno is a 1-4 player medium-weight Euro game with a strong thematic tie-in to Dante's Inferno. This game is over on GameFound. I'll have a link to the crowdfunding campaign down below, and of course all rules, components, all that are prototype, subject to change. And with that, let's go ahead and dive into how this game operates. Now, I won't be going through every single aspect of it. This will not be a full rules teach, but I'll try to give you a general overview of how the game plays before diving into what I like, don't like, and see others not liking, and my final thoughts and timestamps to everything down below. So, how does the game play? What are you trying to do? Well, ultimately, you're trying to help navigate the various souls through hell. At least thematically, that's what you're doing. Every turn is going to have two phases to it. You're going to be first picking a soul, and then moving them down onto one of these areas over here to slowly move through hell. There's going to be this whole slow transition all the way through hell, a bit of a bridge or a wall that you have to cross over here, but you're going to start by paying, and then paying to cross the River Styx, and then taking a soul and putting them on any single location. And then from there, you have two options, or three technically. You can do a kind of a pass action recalling everything, but the main two options you're taking are either taking a bit of a worker placement action as you follow what the soul does based on where that soul went, or alternatively, you're going to be recalling your family members and casting an accusation, which is the thing that will slowly cause Dante to move slowly down over here, which will eventually trigger the end game. So again, you start by navigating a soul through that process, and I'll get back more to that soon. You then take usually a worker placement action, sometimes a recall action, and then from there you're going to go ahead and continue that back and forth to try to, well, get points. And we haven't really talked about how to get points, but let's focus on that for a second. There's going to be a bit of an area control kind of problem here, more of a race than an area control, down this little puzzle down here. You're going to be placing markers on the board and or moving these markers along these rows, and then when Dante reaches certain points, you're going to go ahead and trigger who gets the soul for that marker. So again, whenever you do an accusation, which we'll come back to, Dante's going to reach these certain points, you'll go ahead and see who has the furthest on the track. So for example, we have this situation, let's move this up over here. Let's say Dante just reached that third soul over there. Let's pretend this is the situation. Then Pink is currently ahead, and Pink will get the soul for that, which is going to help him score points for these souls that have rested on this tier. Whenever a soul reaches the tier of its color, it's going to rest there. It's going to go from standing up to lying down, and it's going to stay there, where other souls can now skip over that soul. In general, whether a soul is resting or not, other souls can skip over that, letting them get further down faster. But ultimately, your goal is to try to ensure that souls hit the region you want them to hit, assuming you are scoring for that region, and there's a lot of ways to make sure they don't hit those regions if you don't think you're the one scoring for that region. So again, high level idea over here, you're moving souls down, you're trying to find their resting place, you're going to score points for having those resting places filled, assuming you're the one who has the most souls in that region. You're going to score points based on this chart without getting too much into it. These charts over here can move up or down, but at the end of the game, if these are empty, they're going to move down for each one of those that are empty, meaning they're going to score fewer points if these rows are not completely filled within that color, which means whoever's scoring red is now scoring fewer points because red did not fill up. You're going to try to get that red scroll by when Dante comes over here, being the furthest on this track, but additionally, whenever your marker hits this fourth tier over here, you're going to get a half scroll, which you can use towards anything. So if you get enough advancement on these, or any other ways you can get your hands on those, you will be able to cash those in for wild scrolls, and be able to score the regions you think are the most advantageous for you. So it's a bit of a fight over the one-off scrolls, and then the ability to cash in for other scrolls as you moved up those tracks. So kind of high level what you're doing over there. You're trying to be mindful of your score by trying to get a bit of area control on the main board where you're working with other players or against them depending on who's trying to vie for those points. One of the interesting things about the game is the fact that as you move down, you're often trying to lead the board situation to be favorable to where you think you'll be, even though you don't even know if you're the one who's going to score those things later, if that makes sense. Going back to the actual nitty-grittiness of the actual turn selection, like I said already, you move a soul down. So you either pay to cross the river, or if you're already past the river, you just go ahead and continue to move around, skipping any souls that are currently in your way. So you can jump over souls that are in your way, which could be a good thing or a bad thing, depending where you're trying to go. Although over here we have green, who actually wants to get to the green tier over there. But you're going to be going there, and then you're going to be taking a worker placement action based on the symbols shown over here. So for example, let's say we pretend our first soul went over here, then you can see over here, this would be the worker placement spot. We can take one of our people and go to either of these spots to be able to take that action. That's going to be true for all 8 of the actions that you have, and those are variable. You can mix and match. You have a bit of a different setup every single time, but you can have 8 different actions with 4 different symbols. Those symbols are driven by where the soul lands, and then from there, you go ahead and take a worker placement spot on that action, or alternatively, you do an accusation, which is where you pull back your workers from that particular zone. So, and again, high level, there's lots of intricacies here that I'm not going to get into because there's a lot of little small details. But high level, let's go through what the actions are, how they all try to help you as you ultimately are trying to vie to get up these tracks and score as many points as possible. To that end, reading from, in fact, let's go ahead and move this down a bit so you can actually see this on the top camera the best way possible. Maybe it's it's a long board. I didn't want to put it lengthwise. But over here, going through the different actions, over here you're going to be able to go ahead and get money. Money is going to be essential for a lot of the things in the game, and when you go to this spot, you're going to get 2 money plus 1 money for every guest in your guest house, which you have one right down here. In order to get more guests, you're going to have to build more towers and then get more guests to join your guest house. So there are ways to go ahead and get more, but right now you would just get 3 money over there, although there is a max of 4 on this action. This action allows you to do what I just did and puts a new level to your tower. Over here, you have the opportunity to pay 2 gold coins to get 2 drachmas, and then move a resource from your tower. You're going to have resources on your towers to your board, where you can go ahead and place them on these regions over here to get more bonuses, including over here, like points for the scrolls you have, points for the advancements over here. Over here, alternatively, you can go ahead and play a card. These cards over here will give you both in-game and end-game points, giving you in-game benefits and end-game points for the left or the right side when you play those cards, although you have to make sure you pay the right resource, so for instance, bread or military, to be able to actually go ahead and play those cards. Up here, you're going to be able to add more guests to your tower. You do have to actually have a spot for them, so you have to have built that new tower, and then you're going to get money based on the tier that they're at. Over here, you get new little workers. They're a different kind of worker, but when you go to that location, you're going to be able to go ahead and recruit a new worker when you recall, so you're going to have 1 more worker for the next round, and some of those workers are actually helpful towards getting into certain zones. Certain zones on the board require these smaller workers to get into, or alternatively require a smaller worker, or you have to pay money to do so. Over here, you're going to be able to go ahead and recall your workers from the tower. Basically, we haven't talked about this heavily, but when you do an accusation phase, you're going to have a worker that kind of gets locked into the tower, locking up your workers and making it so that you have to take recalls more often. Once you have a few workers in there, generally 2 over there, you're going to have the opportunity to recall 2 workers from the tower when you take this action. Over here, you can turn 3 gold coins into 3 drachmas, and then you can either go ahead and advance one of these markers on this track, which I realize you can't see because it's so far back, advance one of the markers on the track, or alternatively place a little token on this wall, which is the only way you can actually start to have these souls cross the lower wall over here. Additionally, you can go ahead and either move or utilize one of the monsters in the game, or alternatively, utilize the river sticks, returning souls in order to get a benefit down on, well again, I realize you can't see this over here, let's move this back up now, down on these regions over here. That's the high level of what the actions are doing. The core idea of all of these things is eventually these things are all driving you towards being able to move up on these tracks as much as possible. You need money in everything in this game. You're going to need money to pull more souls into sticks, to play cards, to do all these things. So you're trying to balance all your economies by taking those various actions, but ultimately you're trying to get your tokens on this track to move forward as fast as possible so that when Dante does move forward to these regions, you're going to benefit by getting these souls and therefore get the area control aspect of where you're trying to juggle these souls. One aspect we haven't talked about is the various creatures in the game. You're going to have a bunch of creatures, you're going to have 2 per game, and you're going to put them into play, and those are going to be activated for a few ways. So for example, when Dante hits these regions over here, when you pay for that card over there, and those give you ways to control the souls. So you either get extra points to possibly lock down the souls. They have a variety of abilities, but for example, Medusa is a particularly fun one. Medusa can lock souls in place, which both helps fill the rows you're trying to get, but it also ensures that souls that are going towards their opponent's row, if your opponent is scoring well for yellow souls, locking those souls up on an earlier row so that they both can't score for yellow and possibly can help you score for yours, that can give you a bit more control in the game. You're trying to utilize all these abilities to ultimately, again, get that area control, get as many points as possible, to be able to lock in those endgame, to be able to advance on these tracks. Whenever Dante returns over here, wherever you do a casting, whenever you cast an accusation, you're going to be able to implement the color of that building. So for example, if you go ahead and cast judgment in that yellow building up there, which you can see in the corner, then you'll go ahead and be able to activate this benefit down here on this yellow row over here, being able to utilize the river sticks benefits and get a point. So you're going to go ahead and try to be mindful of all of these things over here. There's a few other things that we haven't gotten into. We haven't really fully gotten into all the way these score, all the endgame conditions over here, this aspect of kind of taking loans right away, but at the cost of points, but you can go ahead and get the drachmas that you need if you're in a pinch. There's a bunch of other things to go into, but the general idea of playing through Inferno is you're trying to navigate the souls, get a degree of area control, and be mindful of all the things that work together to give you the points you need, or the control over the board and the points you need in this thematic interpretation of Dante's Inferno as a worker placement Euro game. And with that, let's go ahead and dive into the review, starting off with ease of play. The ease of play on this, not the easiest. The rules all come together, but it really is a game that benefits from walking people through a few turns as you go. Because there's a lot of disconnect. In fact, even the actions in the game versus how those actions translate into victory points, they're not immediately intuitive as you go through it, which means you kind of need to teach people the game, but then also teach them how to score and kind of chain together how those things operate, which I have found is not the easiest. This is a game where you start to pick up, oh, okay, fine, I'm going to do this, okay, great, oh, now I'm seeing how this area control puzzle works. There's a bit of a game here of trying to just figure out how to make sure everything's connected, because while I think the actions themselves, nothing is particularly complicated in this game. There's 8 basic worker placement actions, that's all there is. They have handy dandy little player aids that will walk you through what those are and give you everything you need to know. So the actual rules themselves are not too much, but the way everything works together strategically, I find has not been intuitive, at least for my game group. It does require some walking them through, holding their hands as you go through it. Past that, the game can run, well, it depends on the player count you're playing into, but I'd say a short game might come in at 90 minutes with 2 players, but that would be like a short game, and after you both know it, this game can run a bit on the longer side. The amount of things that happen just to slowly move towards endgame, have Dante moving down the board, taking all your actions, I'd say you're probably looking at the 2 hours plus in general to play this game. As far as what I like, don't like, and can see others not liking, to start with what I like over here, which is the great implementation of theme and mechanics. Mechanically speaking, this is a worker placement game, and that's kind of the core idea of it. But the thematic way that they have all these souls flowing into the board and slowly moving down this track, slowly into the deeper echelons of hell, is that actually what Dante's Inferno is? I know there's a whole concept of the 9 stories, but I'll admit I'm not as up to date. But the whole process of Dante kind of navigating through there and guiding these souls, and that whole process does come across in the game, although I admit I probably should brush up on my Dante's Inferno lore more as I go through this. Well, not as I go through this in general. But past that, the variety in actions that you have in the game, the ways you can take different things to drive your things forward, because there are a bunch of things you're trying to go for. You want more workers, you want more people in your tower, you want more guests in your tower. You need to balance your monetary income, because you really need to juggle all those things. Not enough workers means other people are getting more actions faster than you. Having more workers but not enough money means you'll be starved for resources and possibly have to take loans or just find a way to catch up on the actions. If you don't properly control where you have a presence on the board in terms of getting your workers out to different zones and being able to therefore accuse in different zones and have complete control over this track to get the benefits you need to advance your tokens, to place new tokens out, there are so many different ways you can manipulate the game to get the things you need, but you have to find those chains in the game, and the interplay between the actions, while not obvious, is present. The way all those actions tie together to give you a Eurogame that is challenging but forces you to really think through, how am I going to try to get ahead of my opponent, and you're doing all that with a timer on the game. Because as much as these actions can be very strong and beneficial, like these in particular, these ones are the ones that Dante's going to be reaching first. So if you want to go ahead and get that first region over there, you need to go ahead and lock in your control on this top row ASAP that first turn, or just give up entirely on the idea that that's the row you're going for and try to make sure that those souls don't score for whoever did end up getting there. There's a lot of area control push for the scroll and navigation around how that interplays with the board, and the variety of monsters they give you to give you, again, ways to either mess with other opponents or alternatively just ways to get more points, gives you a nice little interplay in addition to the variety of the way the actions are all linked up, so you have different actions together, combined with the variety of monsters, means that you are trying to play through slightly different puzzles, and of course your cards as well, as you try to figure out how to optimize for that particular game that you're going through. As far as things I don't like in the game, a few things. First of all, the biggest thing I'd say is as much as thematically this game works well for what the theme is and the actions and all that, that kind of disconnect between what you're doing and how obvious it is to how that translates into points means that this is not a game that I appreciated until I was, at my first game I'd say I barely appreciated it at all. That's not true. My first game it took me a while. Like, most of the way through is where I started to understand and grok all the things that were going on and how these all tied together to me actually winning. My first game playing Dante's Inferno, I just did stuff, and I didn't really understand how to actually win. I understood the rules, but how to actually turn the actions in the game to winning did not work for me. And the problem is that that concept is prevalent when I'm going to go ahead and teach it to the next players, to my group as well. And so it is a game where there is a bit of a disconnect that doesn't seem to, the theme and mechanics merge, but the mechanics and the mechanics don't merge, if that makes sense. And they do merge, they do work together, but they don't feel directly interlinked. It feels like you're doing two different things. You're doing a whole little management puzzle, and then you have to try to find the ways those actually turn into points, but those ways are present. I'll also say that daring people to move first isn't a fun game in general. I never like games where it's kind of like, I'm going to wait around and see if I can push you to go before me and take that action. Basically, in the game, you're constantly moving souls, but how you move a soul might set the next person up for a better action, for a jump, for a soul that's scoring. Whenever you lay down a soul, you're going to be getting the points in that row, so do I want to move this soul from here down to here, where then you can move it? Do I want to possibly, if I move this soul down here, you'll be able to jump me? And so there's a constant degree of holding back from the thing you want to do until somebody eventually just has to, because that's the action they need. And so that kind of waiting aspect is not a feeling I enjoy in games. I want to feel like I'm chasing things, not like I'm waiting on things. And Dante's Inferno to me definitely had a degree of, well, don't do the thing you want to do because you want to wait till the other person does the thing you want to do, because then you can benefit from the thing you want to do. I'd say that if this is a problem at all player counts, it's probably worse at 2-player counts, because at least at higher player counts, you're kind of like, whatever, I have to move at some point, and I may not even benefit from the action anyway. Versus at a 2-player count, literally, if I just stalemate with you back and forth, eventually one of us is going to get that soul, so I can't even like say, well, someone else is going to get it, I may as well just move forward. So it is a slight problem in terms of the feeling I get playing, the holding back from actions as opposed to the chasing of actions. The wall is an interesting mechanic in the game. This little wall will stop souls from crossing. It's an interesting mechanic that I don't know if I felt particularly rewarded by it. When a soul reaches the wall, when they're over here by the wall, and you have to go ahead and cross it, you have to have a token in the wall, a spot that you've earned from a few ways you can get this, but you have to go ahead and get one of these over here, and then you can cross the wall. The problem is once you do so, your opponents can go ahead and continue to move the soul. So it's almost this temporary obstruction that I don't know if I felt overly rewarded by it. So sure, at one particular tier, I have freedom and flexibility that you don't. But that doesn't continue past the tier, so it's kind of like just whatever, I'll wait till someone else moves the soul, and then we're back to there. Meaning there is a benefit to going to blocking up those walls, but I don't know if I felt the benefit was a particularly strong one, because it feels like I have to just chase to earn that, and then I get that reward for one particular segment and move of the game. So I feel the wall, I almost wish the wall impacted things further down, but you'd have to change how that operated. Ultimately, I like the concept of the wall, but the execution felt like it was less rewarding to engage with it. As far as what I can see others not liking, first of all, the game can be a little long running, especially if you're playing, like, do not play this at 4 players as your first play. This will be a 3-hour session, if not longer, if you're playing at 4 players on your first play. There's a lot to go through. There's a lot to understand, and the slow moving of everything else will it'll just take a while. It'll take a while to go through it. So I would encourage you to, yeah, it's a long running game. It may not be for you in that sense. Additionally, the ability to mess with other players' tracks, especially at higher player counts, meaning effectively you have the opportunity to do various actions that will mess with where one of these tokens are, and to lower the score for a track or to raise the score for a track. And raising the score is always a good feeling. You're doing that to help people score points, ideally yourself. Lowering the score is kind of like a little bit of a less feel-good moment when you lower somebody else's score. And again, going back to that variety of player counts, at least in a 2-player game, there's the direct back and forth where when I lower your score, it's practically the equivalent of me raising my score. But when you do it at higher player counts, it's like, oh, congratulations, I lost points because John went ahead and messed with my score, and now I'm losing to David instead. You're going to have that aspect of a little bit of feels bad movement, as people can manipulate and target the person who they feel is in the lead, whether or not that person is winning the game. As far as final thoughts on Dante's Inferno, nope. Not Dante's Inferno. There's so many games coming out with Dante's Inferno right now. There's like 3 games, or 2 games and an RPG. There's maybe 3 games and an RPG, I think it is. There's a bunch of these Dante's and Inferno's things coming out at the moment. But going back to this over here, as far as Inferno, as far as my final thoughts on Inferno, I've enjoyed this game, and I think there's a lot going on with it, while also not being... There are some aspects that hold it back for me. The longer player time, the slight disconnect between the actual mechanics and execution, the fact that some of the actions themselves that don't inherently feel rewarding, the end puzzle of what you're doing all comes together nicely, but any individual action, I don't really get that thrill of, look, I'm doing this fun action. A lot of it is setup stuff. Oh, look, I'm building the next tower so I can go ahead and put the next guest in. Did either of those actions feel satisfying? Not in particular, but eventually they'll pay off as I take other actions that all fold together nicely, and there is an aspect of the guest, again, there's some things we haven't really gotten to as far as the nature of accusation. There's a lot of things we haven't gotten to as far as the nitpicks of the rules, but not every action is rewarding in the game. Not every aspect of the game is rewarding. The net result of the whole thing is rewarding, but there's a lot to get there. So for me, this is a 3.5 out of 5. I enjoy the game. There's a lot of good things going on, and there's some things that hold it back for me. As far as other game recommendations, if you're looking for another game that has a whole bunch of track management that I personally find a lot more rewarding, Lost Ruins of Arnak from CGE is going to have some of the kind of disparate worker placement plus movement on tracks, some elements. I don't know why it is exactly, but the combination of elements kind of, to me, had me feeling very similarly about those games, so I highly recommend that one. And if you're looking for something else that has a bit of an interesting theme, a very different game entirely, but a unique theme, a darker theme, a very good implementation, some degree of, horror mixed in, The Nightmare Cathedral by Board and Dice is an area control game that has a very different game going on, but for whatever reason, I got similar vibes from both these games. In any case, and until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you found this video helpful, and as always, I hope you have a good one.